New York City did not begin as a shining symbol of power, money, or culture, but as a swampy, forested land inhabited for thousands of years by the Lenape Native American tribe who lived sustainably along the rivers and harbors long before Europeans arrived. And when Dutch traders reached the area in 1624, they saw not a city but opportunity, naming it New Amsterdam and building it as a trading post for beaver pelts, unintentionally laying the foundation for global capitalism. And when the British seized it in 1664 and renamed it New York after the Duke of York, the city began its transformation from colonial outpost to imperial asset, serving as a strategic port that connected the New World to Europe, Africa, and the Caribbean. And by the 18th century, New York had already become a melting pot of merchants, enslaved Africans, immigrants, and revolutionaries, playing a pivotal role in the American Revolution as both a British stronghold and a symbol of rebellion. And when the United States was formed, New York briefly became the nation's first capital, signaling its future importance. But true power did not come from politics alone, it came from geography, because New York possessed one of the greatest natural harbors on earth, deep, protected, and perfectly positioned for transatlantic trade. And this advantage exploded in the 19th century with the construction of the Erie Canal, a bold and controversial engineering project that connected the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes, effectively turning New York into the gateway between America's interior and the rest of the world, instantly making it richer and more influential than rival cities like Boston, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. And as factories rose and ships flooded the harbor, millions of immigrants poured into the city through Ellis Island, fleeing poverty, war, and persecution, transforming New York into a human engine powered by ambition, desperation, and hope, where Italians, Irish, Jews, Germans, Chinese, and countless others worked brutal hours in sweatshops, docks, and construction sites, building skyscrapers upward because the island could no longer expand outward. And those skyscrapers became monuments not just to architecture, but to capitalism itself, symbols of a new age where money, finance, and corporate power ruled the world. And by the early 20th century, Wall Street had become the beating heart of global finance, controlling banks, stock markets, and investments that shaped economies far beyond American borders. And even when the Great Depression nearly destroyed the city, New York adapted again, using massive public works, bridges, subways, and housing projects to reinvent itself, proving that its true power lay in reinvention. And during World War II, New York became the command center of the Allied economy, producing weapons, managing logistics, and financing victory, while also becoming the home of the United Nations after the war, officially turning the city into a global diplomatic capital where world decisions were debated under one skyline. And as America rose as a superpower, New York rose with it, exporting culture through Broadway, Hollywood connections, music, fashion, and media, turning the city into a global trendsetter that influenced how the world dressed, talked, invested, and dreamed. And even during its darkest periods in the 1970s, when crime, poverty, and bankruptcy threatened to collapse the city, New York once again refused to die, rebuilding through resilience, creativity, and relentless ambition, becoming the center of modern finance, technology, advertising, and global media by the late 20th and early 21st centuries, surviving terrorist attacks like September 11th that shook the entire planet, yet responding not with retreat but with rebuilding taller, stronger, and more defiant, proving that New York's true identity is not just wealth or power but survival, because this city has been invaded, burned, flooded, attacked, bankrupted, and written off countless times, yet it continues to dominate because it concentrates people, money, ideas, and influence in a way no other city ever has, where decisions made in Manhattan ripple across global markets within seconds, where cultures collide and evolve faster than anywhere else, where ambition is both fuel and currency. And today, New York stands not as a perfect city, but as the most influential urban organism on earth, a place that controls finance without being a nation, culture without borders, and power without a throne, proving that the untold truth of New York City is this: it did not become powerful by accident, nor by force alone, but by geography, immigration, capitalism, creativity, and an unbreakable ability to adapt, making it not just a city, but a living system that shapes the modern world from A to Z, from its ancient roots to its uncertain future, forever rising, forever changing, forever New York. What comes next for New York City will not resemble its past, yet it will be forged entirely by it, because the city now faces the ultimate test of whether the most influential metropolis on Earth can survive the forces it unleashed as climate change turns a city built on water into a battleground against rising seas, violent storms, and flooding that threatens subways, neighborhoods, and the systems that keep millions alive, triggering a new era of radical engineering where seawalls, floodgates, elevated streets, and redesigned coastlines reshape the city as dramatically as skyscrapers once did, and New York will not surrender to the ocean, but attempt to outbuild it, transforming itself into a global proving ground for climate survival that other megacities will be forced to study, while technology quietly rewires its power structure as artificial intelligence, automation, and digital finance replace shouting trading floors with silent algorithms moving trillions in milliseconds, making New York less visible, yet more dominant, as power shifts from physical presence to digital control. And as remote work fractures old routines, Manhattan evolves from a single-purpose workplace into a dense ecosystem of housing, culture, labs, studios, and vertical communities, recycling its own towers to solve crises through reinvention rather than expansion, while inequality hardens into the city's most dangerous fault line, stretching the distance between unimaginable wealth and daily survival until social cohesion itself is tested, forcing New York to innovate new economic realities or face unrest. And immigration once again rewrites the city's DNA as climate refugees, exiles, and dreamers from every continent arrive, pushing New York beyond national identity into something planetary, a city spoken in dozens of languages where culture mutates faster than laws can follow, fueling relentless creativity and ensuring its grip on global influence even as rivals rise. And geopolitically, the city grows not as a seat of government, but as a command center of networks, hosting the United Nations, financial engines, media giants, and tech platforms that shape markets, narratives, and diplomacy without armies, turning New York into a capital of soft power where wars are influenced by money, sanctions, information, and perception. And as America wrestles with division and decline, New York increasingly functions like a global city-state, economically fused to the world more than to any single nation, resilient because its alliances are financial, cultural, and global rather than political, and culturally it will continue exporting music, fashion, film, and digital movements, but driven by younger, more decentralized creators who reflect a city that belongs to anyone ruthless enough to adapt, while surveillance and data expand quietly in response to crime, terror, and cyber warfare, turning New York into one of the most watched cities on Earth and reviving the eternal tension between freedom and control. And beneath it all, infrastructure undergoes its most extreme evolution since the subway, as smart grids, autonomous transit, green energy, and vertical logistics transform how millions move, eat, work, and survive, turning the city into a living machine built for density and speed. And despite endless predictions of collapse, New York endures not because it is stable, but because it is indispensable, absorbing shocks, shedding broken systems, and re-emerging altered but alive after every financial crash, pandemic, attack, and disaster. And in the long run, its greatest weapon will not be money or towers, but relevance, because relevance attracts power, talent, and attention. And as long as the world looks to New York to define ambition, success, culture, and momentum, the city will dominate even as its shape changes, with a future skyline of green towers, adaptive structures, and survival-driven architecture rising above streets still powered by pressure and ambition. And the soul of New York will remain relentless, competitive, and unforgiving, rewarding those who evolve and discarding those who hesitate, proving that its future will be neither utopia nor ruin, but something far more dangerous and human, a city that magnifies the world's contradictions and shows the future early, because New York was never meant to be finished. It is a system, an experiment, a warning, and what comes next is not an ending, but another transformation that will once again redefine what a city can become.